Does it ask you to
Yeah.
accept or something? Okay, great. Awesome. All right. Cool. Well, Jason, thanks for doing this. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
All
So
right. Cool. So we're doing The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And I think the format we're going to do, because Jason, you kind of put it together like an outline of the entire book, chapter by chapter. You've read this several times. You've read it more than me. This is only my second reading. And you've also read in the original Chinese. So, it makes me even more interested to get your perspective. And, we can talk about differences between translation because even some of the back and forth we've done so far, we've noticed that there've been some pretty drastic differences between the English translation that I have, which is the Lionel Giles, and so were you working with the translation, or was this your own translation from the Chinese that you've been doing?
yeah, actually, I read many times, but read in original Chinese. It's
Okay.
ancient Chinese, which is different than today's Chinese.
Mm.
I have to say, Sun Tzu's writing is, even it's in ancient form, it's much easier
Uh.
than others like Dao De Jing or
Mm.
Zhuangzi, or even much easier than Confucius analect. So that's a good part. Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't even think of that. It's probably like the equivalent of maybe like reading Old English or something for me, where you're kind of having to do that translation in your head because people don't speak that way. Is it that kind of thing?
I would say it's even more difficult than Old
Okay.
English. Because like Old English, it's at least when we talk about Old English, I will call like Spencer's Quarry Queen, something like this.
Mm.
Okay. At that time, 16th century, it's not that difficult. Okay, but I think the Chinese ancient language is difficult. The big challenge is a lot of writing has no subject. Okay?
Mm.
So they just spell, and every Chinese character could be interpreted as noun, adjective, or verb. Okay, so
Okay.
that's also created a problem. So, in my opinion, especially reading ancient Chinese texts,
Hmm.
we will put who is the audience. I think that's important.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's always like kind of upfront whenever you're reading. It'll say, this is who this is supposed to be addressed to, or who the reader is supposed to be. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and this was
So
something in this text that you taught me that I didn't realize was that uh, different chapters in the Art of War are addressed to different kind of personnel. So,
yeah,
like, I believe
I,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I would say that probably that's my idea. Okay,
Mm.
because I didn't see other commentary, even in Chinese commentary, talking about this. But of
Okay.
course, I'm not a scholar, so I don't read a lot commentary. That's
Mm.
true. So
Yeah.
just based on my understanding, I see first the book is not really a big book like
Right. Yeah.
dialogue. Okay, it's only 13 chapter, and I will assume it will probably for sure shorter than Analect, shorter than I think it's probably the same size as Dao De Jing, which only
Yeah.
5,000 character. Okay.
Hmm.
So I think it's probably about about 2,000 character. I assume.
Mm.
So
Awesome. Well, yeah. So maybe just before we dive into it chapter by chapter, we could say a little bit about Sun Tzu. So, from my understanding, there was a historical person by the name of Sun Tzu around the time that this was written, but it's possible or maybe even probable that this wasn't written by one person. It might have been like the accumulation of several people or several ideas during that time, and then the credit was given to Sun Tzu. Is that
it's
right?
possible, and the time is about 20. We can roughly assume it's about 2,300 years ago. And
Okay.
at that time, in China, we call it the warring state. Okay. That time, China is not a country. It's like 7 major countries. Okay. And they fight each other. They try to unite, okay, or conquer the land. Okay, so.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. So yeah, we can kind of keep that in mind as we're going through this. So that's the format. We'll go through chapter by chapter, and then after we get through that, we'll kind of maybe look at some key themes or patterns that emerged. But yeah, I'll hand it over to you. Let's start with chapter 1.
Okay, yeah. Before I go to chapter 1, let me give some historical background during this time. Okay, just I said, it's a warring state, and before warring state, you can imagine at that time China has a emperor, okay, which is weak, a feudalism system, and then it's kind of like a big family. But during that time, because the invention of new technology, so the feudal laws is no more not respect the so-called the common emperor. Okay, so they start to fight each other. So the kind of the war technique has changed. Okay, because the invention of iron. Before, the size of war, they use bronze. So the copper or bronze. The war is kind of like a gentleman's game, right? The size is no more than a few hundred because the weapons are expensive. Usually the noble people or the aristocrats, okay, they fight the war. So a few hundred, but at this time, the size is humongous, right? You can easily accumulate 100,000 people, soldiers, okay, to fight. So the technique has been changed from gentleman's game to life or death situation. And at that time, many philosophers, we call philosophers, they try to resolve. Okay, resolve doesn't mean bring peace. Sometimes they just help the emperor or help the feudal law. So they have many schools, right? And that's why if you are familiar with Chinese philosophy, the time we call warring state and 100 schools, because they have 100 schools of different philosophers, okay, philosophies. And Sun Tzu, this one just represent one of them. Okay, so it's not all. So basically, that's one school, and the same time, Mencius, okay, in the Confucius school, people be familiar with, or legalism, okay, and Moism, which is more religious. There's many schools bring up, but I just want to say that's the only one of many. Okay, so-called one of the 100 schools. So, okay, so that's
gotcha. Okay, that's good to know too. So, from what I gathered, so it's a bit of a transition period, bit of a maybe even could say chaotic period. This warring states period. We're kind of transitioning. There's not one dominant ideology, is also what I gathered. That this was maybe one of, you said, hundreds of maybe philosophies or ideologies going on at the time. Cool. And this, it also sounded like you were saying the, warfare was also changing, as well as, the country itself, because you had somewhat small numbers, you said, like in the hundreds, and then you're going to hundreds of thousands. And so the tactics therefore had to change as well. And so this is maybe like one of the first treaties to kind of deal with these new logistics that generals are having to deal with, and they're maybe approaching warfare a little bit differently.
That's correct.
Is that fair? Okay.
And the reason I bring up these ones, I just don't want to have the audience have the wrong impression, like, that's the way ancient Chinese do. Okay, that's just one of the 100 schools. When I say 100, okay, of course it's exaggerated, but one of the many schools. And then, of course, if you read almost the same text written by Mencius, which is a Confucius school, the answer will be totally different, right?
Yeah.
When the feudal law asks, how can I unite the nation? Mencius' answer is, why you talk about profit? Why you talk about unite? you should love your people. So that's a totally different answer, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's many different answers, but this one is just one of them. And today we have to confine ourselves when we read this one is, okay, that's the feudal law. The feudal law, they want to conquer, they want to win the war. And I have the chief advisor telling me how to do it. Okay, so decision already made. Okay, I'm not going to do Mention's way. Okay, and I'm going to do it. That's the reason we are reading this one.
No, I think that's important to bring up, because I mean, you could think of the same thing today. Like, you know, if 100 years from now somebody were to ask, like, what did Americans think at the time? You know, what did Americans think in like the early 21st century? Like, there wouldn't be one answer or one text you could point to, because there's many like very extreme ideologies. You know, you have people from pacifists to you know, anarchists. Like, it's all across the board. So it sounds like, you know, China during that time was no different.
Yeah,
But,
just like when you teach your kids how to play chess, right? The way you play chess, okay, you have to cheat. You not really cheat. You have to hide your strategy. You cannot be totally honest. But the same technique, you are not going to do it when you are in school or you are dealing with your friend. I think that's the thing we need to separate. You know?
Totally. And that's maybe another thing we can say up front as well, is that like this book, in at least in the last you know, couple hundred years, definitely the last couple decades, has been used and thought of in a lot of fields outside of warfare. You know, it's pretty popular in business circles. It's pretty popular even, you know, amongst people navigating their, you know, interpersonal relationships. But I think it's important to say that like that wasn't what Sun Tzu or the people that were writing this had in mind. You know, so when they're pretty much speaking strictly of warfare. Is that right? And
that's right. Yeah. So that's why I will always think that who is the audience is very important. So we can, and then let's go back to the text, right? So the text has a 13 chapter. In my opinion, it's from very high level to very low level. Okay. So the highest, why you want to go to the war, right? So you can assume the audience is the prince, the feudal lord, right? So the Sun Tzu, let's assume a guy named Sun. He's advising the feudal lord, okay, the prince. Why? Just like Machiavelli advised to Dimitri family, right? Why you want to win the war? Okay, that's your purpose. Why? Okay, the very high level to the chapter 12, 13 become very low level to the very detailed, like how to lay out your military, how to set fire. Okay, that's not the advice to the prince, not the advice to the commander, right? So that's why when we quote the text from Sun Tzu, okay, of course you can quote it and use any place you want, just like Abraham Lincoln quoted the house divided cannot stand from Bible. It's not really what Jesus meant, but we can use the same word, but assume a little bit more academically. So we need to know on which chapter. So we will know who is the audience. So we will know he's not going to teach the commander, say, why you want to go to war? Do you know war costs a lot?
Yeah.
But you also don't tell the prince to say how to set the fire, burn the equipment from outside, from inside. You don't tell the prince about it. So I think that's very different.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so we'll go more. The book is kind of formatted so it goes more from like high level philosophies at the beginning and gets more and more specific to the end chapters that are more based on the specific tactics. Well, cool. Let's start with chapter 1.
Yeah, we can start with the chapter. I roughly separated this book, 13 chapters to 3 levels. Okay, and I will assume the first level, I call it the military philosophy. That's on the political stage. That's from chapter 1 to 4. And from chapter 5 to 8, I consider them as the second part. I consider them as military science. Okay, that's planning, and we can assume the audience is the commander in chief. Okay, so or secretary of defense, and then the last 5 chapters from 9 to 13, I consider as military strategy, practical stage. That means the audience is the commander, okay, who is in the warring zone. Okay. So
Gotcha.
that's the way I like to separate. So we can start from chapter 1, which presumably is the highest level. So the audience should be the prince, the feudal lord. So the first chapter called the translation we will call first calculation. Basically, it's talking about the war is the vital importance to the state. Okay, it's a matter of life and the death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Okay, so that's very important sentence. That means anything, if you want to wage a war, you have to think about, is that the only choice, right? It's how important this one. So he's not telling you, you have to go to the war. He first says you to think about it. Okay. Is that that's the thing you really want to do? That's life and death decision. Okay. You have to think about. Okay. So continue. He lay out the so-called very important 5 principles. Okay. And of course, this 5 principle is high-level principle, but the translation is a little bit different. Right? So I just briefly talk about this 5 principle. Basically, it's so-called, the first one is so-called Tao. Okay, that everybody familiar with. If you have some context of Chinese philosophy, 100 schools, every school talking about they have their own Tao. Okay, so that's the Tao, and generally we translate as the moral law. Okay, so we can. The moral doesn't mean treat your parents good, be nice to your friend, not this kind of moral. The moral means whether or not you want to go to the war. Okay, that's your decision. Okay, what's the purpose of the war? You want to conquer the land, okay, or you just want to revenge, or you want to rob their. You have no food, okay, you want to rob their food, or you are fighting for the water resources. What's the reason? What's the purpose?
It's kind of your why, like why?
Yeah,
why
your why? Yeah. Or I just angry, okay, because he killed my brother. So that's the reason, okay. So I think that's the Tao. Second thing, the first thing. Second thing, so-called the heaven, or I think the proper translation should be sky. Okay, that means something during the time we cannot we even don't know, okay, because we don't know it's going to rain or not raining. We don't know the weather. We're totally out of our control. That's the heaven, the sky.
So is it all of the factors in a battle that are out of your control? So things you're saying, like things like the weather, things like
nothing you can do on that.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's going to snow, it's going to snow. It's going to rain, it's going to rain. It's nothing you can do. But that's the thing important.
Yeah.
Right? So you cannot say I have the strongest army and I should win. No, because they have something on the sky.
Right. It's an important factor.
Number 3, but of course, that time has no high tech, and China is in the land, so there's no navy, no air force. So the army is the only thing we are talking about. So the land is also important, right? Number 3, because your land, you cannot change the land. If you're a river, you have a mountain, you have what kind of land? Desert, okay, any kind of forest. That's the land, but different than the sky. You can find a way to fully use it. So you will find out in the last stuff from chapter 9. Okay, they start talking about the land, how to lay out your military, because based on the land, right? So that's different than the sky. Something you cannot change, but you know how to use it.
Right. You can organize your army in certain ways depending on what terrain you're going through or what terrain you're on, or is that kind of
I think the same thing happened if you read the Prince from the Machiavelli. Okay. They have one chapter called Art of War. Okay, so it's very similar. And that chapter, Machiavelli talking about the king, the prince, needs to use your leisure time to do hunting. Okay, because you can not only exercise yourself, your skill, also get familiar with your land.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yeah, so it's a very similar
Yeah.
idea, because at that time in England, in Italy, and also in China, right, they all based on the land, and that's the most important. Even Italy has some navy, but Florence is close to the ocean, but their fighting basically is find in the land. So that's what they are talking about. That's why land is so important.
Okay.
And number 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the number 4 is the commander. Talk about the people. That's the thing you can totally control, right? You consider the audience is the prince. Who you want to become the commander in chief? Let's talk about who is going to. That's built unlike Western culture. In Europe, usually the king, okay, will get on the horseback and the fight, right? So we know this, but in China, even during the early time, the Warring State, I never see in the historical book say which emperor or which king will get on the horseback and fighting. No, at least I don't see that.
To me, that's smart. That's just smarter. You know, why would you want to put your guy who's calling the shots in the middle of the battle?
Yeah, that's right. That's a different system.
He should be in a bunker somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
So you have to choose your commander. So the commander is important. Okay. So that's number 4. Okay. So basically, you can see the layout. You see, Tao is the highest purpose. Then from the something you cannot control, okay, something you can fully use it, then to the people you can deal with that. So you choose the right people. Okay, so that's the commander of the people. Okay, and the number 5. Okay, and I will call it the law or the method, the discipline, the military training. Basically, is talking about your military system, your government, your structure, military structure. So that's the 5 things. Okay, in the very important chapter and the first one. So if I would suggest, if you don't have time to read the whole book, okay, and you can just get familiar with these five principles, and which can be used in any place, not only in the military, in your business, in your school, in your education. I think that's all.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you could apply this to business too, and thinking about like, what is our business's Tao? Like, what is our why? What's our kind of mission statement? I don't know. Sky, I guess, would be all the factors outside of your control. You know, what's happening in the economy, what's happening in the markets.
Economy, what's the foreign competitor? You know, that emerging technology come out, right?
Yeah. And then land would be terrain. I mean, that could even be like, I don't know. Are we trying to sell? Are we trying to
race, right? Like, you know, my marketplace in domestic or Southern California, if I do I say laundry service, right? So
yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, are we trying to sell swim gear in Alaska? Like, you know, what's our terrain? And then commander. This would be what, like the boss or
the manager who you want to hire, how to attract the talent, you know, important. And then the number 5 would be the law, right? Or the method, right? Company structure, you will be flat, okay, hierarchical, okay, and upside down hierarchical, and whatever you want to bring the company culture. So that's very useful, you know, in our daily life, and that's the 5 principles, and have been taught in the ancient Chinese. Yeah.
That's great, and I like how in chapter 1 he kind of leads from there to say, you know, from these 5 principles, we can basically determine what the outcome of the war is. So in my translation, he says, these 7 considerations, I can forecast victory or defeat. So from asking these different questions having to do with the principles, and I won't read all of them, but one of them is like, which of the 2 sovereigns is imbued with the moral law? Which of the 2 generals has the most ability? On which side is discipline most rigorously enforced? Which army is stronger? On which side are the officers the men most highly trained? In which army is there the greatest constancy, both in reward and punishment? So is that right to kind of think, based on what these principles are, you can kind of ask certain questions to determine whether or not you have a good shot of winning the battle?
Yes, here they, I think he lists the 7 questions, right? He lists the 7. Which one is, just like Zach talked about. Actually, in the original text, he talked about 5 principles, then talk about the 7. I think it's 7 questions. They ask 7 questions. So as a prince, you have to ask yourself, okay?
Right.
Okay. So that's very high level talking about, and then the 2 handle, I think that's your translate for the 2 handle. One is so-called okay, I will explain later in the later chapter. Okay, that's a very unique Chinese concept in the chapter we'll talk about. And then also the 12 calculations. Okay, so it cannot just like you are running business, right? You have to run your spreadsheet, right? How much I'm going to invest, how much money I expect to make every year. So you have to do your own calculation. That's also important. You ask your purpose, 5 principles, think about, ask yourself 7 questions. Then it asks you to do the calculation, okay?
Yeah.
And okay, so you have to think about in detail. So that's basics, the chapter 1 is telling you, and you can assume the audience is the prince. He is the person sitting on the desk and thinking about, okay, whether or not I'm going to do. And if I want to do, I have to ask this kind of question.
There was one more thing I wanted to maybe bring up in chapter 1, which was there's this line in my translation. It's all warfare is based on deception.
Yeah.
Hence, when able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe that we are away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. Which we'll get to later, kind of the themes. But this was a theme that I saw come up a lot in this idea of kind of like misdirection.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's in this chapter. I personally, I don't focus a lot on this chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, on this sentence. Okay. This one basically, that's the one I talking about, 12 calculation. Okay, how to calculate all this one, and I think this one reflect a cultural change during that time. Okay, because before the war is more like a gentleman's game. Okay, just like if you watch the movie during the American Revolution, American military is doing different, right? They are either hiding and take
right.
And the British, in today's view, is very stupid. Okay, that's the gentleman's game. You wear red, okay, clothes.
Take turns shooting at each other. Yeah.
Yeah, right now we wear a dark green so you can hide it. But during that time, the British military, they wear red so you can see clearly. And they lay up, right? Even they kill, but they follow certain.
Right.
So in this point, I believe that's the time represent the cultural change.
Yeah.
Because in the ancient text, in the Confucius teaching, still quote some rule like during the fighting, okay, don't kill the person with 2-colored hair. Okay, that means old people. Gray hair.
Okay, yeah.
Don't kill the people when they try to cross the river during the middle. Okay, because it's not moral, right? You have to wait until they cross, right?
Right.
Cross the river, then fight. So they still have this kind of thinking in the ancient time, right? But I believe that, of course, I am no scholar. I'm not scholar. I'm not historian. But I assume that this kind of description, because at that time, just like the British military, they wear red clothes. They follow certain rule. Okay, and that's the fight. But at this moment, then Sun Tzu start to tell the prince, okay, that's a new word. Okay?
Yeah. Well, in this whole art of war, I mean, the term that kind of came to mind was like guerrilla warfare. A lot of the tactics, are based around deception, are based around, only fighting when you have clear advantage, about attacking the enemy's weakness. So it's very different than, like you mentioned, the kind of British way of fighting where you're just kind of taking turns shooting at each other. Sun Tzu would not have approved of that. He's all about misdirecting the enemy and trying to deceive them to gain an advantage.
I think in today's view, we know, if I send anybody knows in the real fighting zone, okay, deceptive is important. You are not going to tell your enemy tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, let's fight. You're not going to do
right.
it. Nobody do that. But why the ancient texts show up something like misdirection, I believe that's personal. I believe because that represents the cultural change, because no more gentleman's game. Okay, that's fighting life or death. Okay, that's the difference.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll come back to that theme, but maybe we can keep going. Chapter 2.
Let's move on to chapter 2. Okay. And then chapter 2, basically, I call it the initiating battle, waging war. Okay. So basically, this one will tell the logistic to the prince. Okay. So the emphasis here is the cost. How much does it cost, right? So Sun Tzu tell the prince, okay, or the king, okay, it costs a lot to wage a war. Okay. So let's assume he already decided to go to the war. He will tell you it's cost a lot. So on the economic side, you have to calculate. Okay, think about the logistic, right? That's cost a lot because the military, they need to eat. So let's say we send the 200,000 military. How much food you are going to eat? You are going to consume. And here, the interesting is Sun Tzu even tell the prince, okay, the detailed information about if you can consume enemy's resources, that's 1 equal 20, right? If you consume 1 carload of resources, that's equivalent your own 20 carload. So whenever you can use your enemy's resources, use it. Okay, so that's the interesting he bring up.
Well, and he's also seems to be saying that you don't want to be in war for a long time because these things add up. He's saying the cost of feeding men every day, that's going to add up really quick. Their weapons or their spears are going to get dulled, I think he says. And, they're also, the morale is going to kind of fade after a while. So there seems to be that theme of, he says, quote, "Though we have heard of stupid haste in war, cleverness has never been associated with long delays. There is no instance of a country having been benefited from prolonged warfare."
And here he even made very specifically talk about the prepared, because you draft people, the farmer, right, to fight. So the people should not be drafted twice, right? That's important, right? You cannot go to the war and next year go to the war again.
Yeah, so they're not gonna be too happy.
And people start to escape to other countries. I think that's the case, if they abandon their property and run to other place. So prepare the food. You cannot prepare over 3 years because that means if the war lasts over 3 years, that's the problem. So at the end, there are 2 very important messages Sun Tzu is telling the prince. First, military for the only reason to fight in the war is to win, not long. Okay, you should win as quick as possible. That's it. That's the only purpose, right? Second, the commander-in-chief is very important because it's your country's life or ruin, or the people survive or die, all depend on this person. So the people, okay, the commander-in-chief is very important. Okay? That's the thing he's trying to tell.
Awesome. And I just wanted to add one other thing, that this was I think from the editor in my book, but it's in brackets. Obviously this isn't the original text. But I'll just read this. He says, Once war is declared, the great general strikes immediately without waiting until every last detail is taken care of. This may seem audacious advice, but all great strategists from Julius Caesar to Hitler realized that time is of vital importance. Too little, too late was not one of their mottos. So I think he's just saying, different war strategists throughout history have used this, they attack right away, partially because you're kind of catching the enemy off guard, and partially because you are not wasting any of these valuable resources.
This part, I will assume that's the translator's message.
Oh yeah, it's definitely the translator. Yeah.
Message. And I don't see this part in chapter. I don't see that. It must be the translator's his or her own thought.
Interpretation, maybe. Yeah.
The interpretation. And then personally, I don't see Sun Tzu talk about timing. He more talk about timing means he talk about timing about the proper time, not about quick. But the taking action when your enemy is not ready. So the moment is important. So I think, and I think in general, I would say Sun Tzu, compared to the Western philosophy or Western thinking, if you want to compare, are more on the defense than attack. I think Western thinking are more on the attack, and Chinese thinking are more on the defense. And we will see, later.
Definitely.
You will see, it's more on the defense. Even in today's, when we control coronavirus, right? You can see in the Asian country more prefer to lock down, strictly social control, and the Western kind of do not control so well. But in other way, Western quickly to develop the vaccine, medicine.
I
think that's a totally different way of thinking, in a different situation.
No, that's a good analogy. The other one I like you brought up when we were talking earlier, we did like a live meetup of this, and you brought up baseball, and you said if you watch American baseball, the scores are like 10-12. You watch like a Chinese baseball game, it's like 1-0.
Yeah, I watched the most one of the Olympic game is Taiwan with Korea. I probably spent like a 3 hour watching the play extension to like 12 innings, and then eventually Korean won 1-0.
Yeah, right.
Totally waste my time.
Yeah, right.
Unlike when Taiwan played with Cuba, that's the interesting game. That's kind of like a 12-10, something like this. Right? So that's an interesting game.
Right. That is interesting. Well, cool. Was there anything else in chapter 2?
Not on my part.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, we can move on to chapter 3.
Awesome.
Which talk about the planning as attack. So here one message is talking about. Of course, it is a different thing, So one important message is he talk about it is not sprint to fight and win all your battles. A lot of general will think about, I have in my lifetime record, I fight 100 battles. I won all of them. Sun Tzu said, no, that's not great, right? The really great situation is what? You even don't go and you won.
Yeah.
So if you go to the battlefield, it's not sprint already. So doesn't matter you fight. So you can think about the real the three situation, right? Some country or some people, they fight a lot every time they won. Or you would rather be another kind of person, he never fight, never go to the war zone, but he achieved his goal, right?
Yeah.
So that's also very important message here.
That's a big principle, and that's one that I think probably applies to a lot of different things in life. That the goal is not to get what you want by fighting. Like that might be, option 3 or something, but option 1 is, you could a lot of times get what you want through other ways, by, making some kind of compromise or some win-win situation. And so I like that. Yeah. Because he's saying, yeah, the best general shouldn't, the supreme general is not the one who wins through fighting. The supreme general is the one that gets their way or shuts down the enemy's plans before a fight even happens. So it's kind of, from my understanding, it's kind of saying like fighting and winning is not your first, shouldn't be
It's
your
not your
first choice.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like in the business, you have a problem with another company, right? So you talk to your lawyer. You don't just go directly find the business litigation lawyer, say, let me sue this guy, right? Basically, go to your general counsel, right? Talk about, we try. Okay. So if your company, you think about your company, you have the 100 litigation. Okay. I want 100 of them. Okay. That doesn't mean that you are doing a great job. You should fire your general counsel, right?
Yeah.
Because why you are doing this way? The good general counsel probably never go to the litigation and have all the deal done. So I think that's a very, very important message here in this chapter. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, and it's not efficient, because Sun Tzu seems to be a lot about, like, he seems to be big on efficiency. And if you're always going to litigation, like you're expending all these costs on lawyers, like and same with battle, like war, as we just talked about, costs a lot of money. So if that's your go-to for resolving all of your problems, like it's just not efficient. There's more efficient ways of doing it.
So like if you're working for the Fortune 500 company, you might have the litigation lawyer in your office, but you don't want your litigation lawyer, go to the courtroom every day, right?
Yeah, right.
Even he will win every lawsuit, but you still want to keep your litigation lawyer in the house, okay, without going to the court. That's probably the best way.
Right. And he gives these 4 levels of attacking.
Yeah.
So number 1 is to block the enemy's plans. Number 2 is to prevent the junction allies of the enemy's forces. Number 3 is to attack the enemy's army in the field. And then number 4 is to besiege walled cities. And again, he kind of prioritized them in terms of like 1 is the best, 4 is the worst. So it's much better to block your enemy's plans than to try to attack your enemies when they're behind like a fortified wall, because you're going to lose a lot more men and resources.
Even you won, you lost a lot.
Right. Yeah. Even if you, exactly. You perfectly phrased it. Yeah.
So if you think about win-win situation, they only can happen during on the first stage, right? Before they are doing something. Okay. Before something happened, you already can block it. Then that's the situation.
Yeah, I love how you phrase that. Even if you won, you've lost. Even if you win that battle, you've lost a bunch of men and resources or whatever the specifics are.
Yeah, and another important, if you won, but then next year you have another situation come out, then you have to draft your people one more time. Okay, so that's also another problem.
Yep.
So we probably quickly can finish this one, and I just want to bring up the important message, which is in the common language in the Chinese conversation. We talk about you have to know yourself and know your enemy and other, okay, to win. Okay, so I think that's become a common.
Do you mind if I read the quote from mine? It's hence the saying, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle.
Yes, and the first sentence actually is in the common saying in the Chinese dialect. Okay, when a parent tell the kids, and before the baseball game, everything that's become a common sentence.
Mm.
You have to know yourself,
Yeah.
and know that we don't use, and actually the word is not enemy. Okay, so know yourself and the other. Okay,
The opponent, or okay, just the other. Yeah.
The word is not use the specific, not use the Chinese word for enemy, which is di.
Mm.
They use the other, which is bi. Okay, so it's not say enemy, it's say other. Okay.
Yeah, which kind of gets to that larger principle of preparation and planning, which is a big theme that runs throughout this whole text. Just studying up on your enemy. Like, what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Studying up on yourself. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses?
Yeah, and I think they have a reason he doesn't use, Sun Tzu doesn't use enemy here, because you haven't started yet, right? The war haven't started yet. You are thinking. So I may think about that, right? So I know him, and I know we are dealing something. Let's assume we are doing business together, okay?
Yeah.
So he's not my enemy until something happened, become my enemy. So at that time, that's why I think he used the word as the other, not using the word as enemy. That's important in this sense, because you don't want neighbor people deal with you or your competitor as enemies so quick, right?
Yeah, enemies kind of suggests like a zero-sum game, whereas other could be not necessarily a zero-sum outcome.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think I think the message here is important.
Okay, cool.
So we can move on the number 4, which is a little bit low level, but we still can assume the audience is the prince, the person who makes decision, right? So
Great.
This one, chapter 4, called the forms to perceive, or a tactical deposition. So basics, we talk about, important is, that's the defense thinking is important. So the lesson here, he put yourself beyond the possibility of defeat. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very important. And then wait for an opportunity of defeating the enemy. Okay, I think that's I'd like to bring this one, is very different than Western military thinking. Western are more thinking about
a good defense is a good offense, or what is the saying? Like that's kind of more Western. It's something like that. You hear, a good defense is a good offense. This kind of reminds me, because I play chess. There's some chess players like Karpov. He was more, his way of playing was to kind of do this. He would set up his pieces and make his moves in a way that basically he became impenetrable, and he would basically strangle his opponents and then wait for them to make a blunder, because he would basically take away any good move. And then the moment they made a blunder, then he would just exploit that, and eventually win the game.
Yeah,
so
that's
seems
very much like Sun Tzu is talking about here.
Okay,
right?
cool.
He talked about make sure yourself beyond. That means impossible of defeat. Right? There's no way you can do that. Totally protect myself and wait for the opportunity of defeating the enemy. When you make a blunder, then I'm going to quickly attack you. So the philosophy here is this: the defending you can totally control, right? But the winning, okay, you protect yourself, you can winning is up to the enemy. Okay, because you have to totally control your safety, but the winning you have no control. You have to wait until your enemy make mistake, then you can attack. Okay. So I think that's bring up the very different thinking. Okay.
And the quote, just to bring that home, is to secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands, but the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself.
Yes, I think that's exactly, and the translation is very good. I think.
Okay, cool.
catch the essence of this meaning. Yeah.
Cool.
And we also talk about the victorious strategy. Okay. The victorious strategy is you have to expect winning, then seek to fight. You don't seeking to fight and hope to win. Okay, so that's important, right? Because before you go to fight, you already know, you expect I'm going to win. Okay, the fighting is just exercise your plan, because I'm doing it, I do everything. Then when I decide to go, that means the enemy already had a mistake. I just exercise my plan. Okay, I just say go, let's do it. So I already know I will. Not like second class general. You send the military out and say, I must fight. I fight to death. I want. Not this way. So I think that's important in this message. Yeah.
Yeah, and the quote for that one, the victorious strategist seeks battle after his plans indicate that victory is possible under them. So you don't take action until you can already see how your plan is going to play out.
Yeah. And then later on to, I think forward to that's the end of this chapter, is kind of like talking about like 5 steps, okay, step by 5 steps to one, right? Start from the measurement. I just not going too much detail, but basically talk about from the measurement. Okay, I think it meant understand the land, to estimate the quantity of the measurement, then do the calculation and the balance. That's the word I use. Find the chance, balance the chance. Okay, and then find the victory. I think that's key.
Okay.
We're talking about. Okay.
Gotcha.
And the last sentence he brings, I don't know what's your last sentence translation on the last sentence. Can you read your last sentence on this one?
I have a victorious army opposed to a routed one is a pound's weight placed in the scale against a single grain. So I took that to mean the organized army is superior to the disorderly army, as in the organized army would be the pound's weight on the scale, and the disorganized army would be the single grain.
You talk about the end of the chapter 4.
Yeah.
Very last.
Oh, very last sentence. It just says so much for tactical dispositions.
Okay, so you didn't translate.
Okay, yeah. Well, why don't you give us the actual or
I think the last sentence is very interesting. Without let me quickly find this one. Okay, my translation. Okay, here this translation. Let me read it. The onrush of a conquering force is like the bursting of pent-up waters into a chasm 1,000 feet deep. So here he talk about like Chinese like use water as a metaphor. Okay, so he talk about like you hold the water on the high place, right? You pent up, that water flow down. Okay, so he's talking about you have to make yourself in this situation, right? When you pent up, okay, open the gate, the water just flush out, right? And no way to stop it. But you got to get ready on this one. So that's the last sentence you talk about. So you can see this one is very important advice to the prince, right? You have to make sure yourself in this situation, like you hold a bunch of water on a high position, and you just ready to open the gate. Okay, whenever I'm ready, the water goes. Nobody can stop it. Okay?
I like that. I like that metaphor. It's very visual, and it kind of
actually the word by word is like this in the Chinese word. That's why I asked you to read the translation.
Okay, yeah.
Translation.
this translator had his own ideas, I guess.
Yeah, it's difficult to translate.
Yeah.
Actually, it's difficult. It's very difficult to translate on this part. Yeah.
Sure. Let's go to chapter 5.
Yeah. So basically, we finish up the first part, right? The talk about. So we can kind of shift the audience, right, to the general or the commander. But it's the role is not that clear. But you can see we move down a little bit. Right now, it's no more talking about like whether or not I should go to the war. What's your purpose? Okay. Right now, the purpose is winning. That's it. Okay. We already passed this decision.
Okay, that's a good distinction.
I think that's very important because this time you don't want your general in command during the war zone and come back to ask you, hey, Mr. President, why do you fight this wrong? So or your a commander in the field come back to ask you, are we looking for win-win situation?
Right. Well, when we did the meetup, that was one of the things one of the women complained about. She's like, Sun Tzu doesn't spend enough time talking about whether or not war is really the best option. But like what we're saying here is, from like chapter 5 onward, it's pretty much presupposed that you are in war, and now we're just kind of telling you how to do it best, or how to win. And
you can imagine the king or the prince, they already hire Sun Tzu, right? That means they already make some decision already.
Right.
If you hire Mencius, they're a different story. Mencius will say, oh, how about love your people, right? So
right. Yeah.
Your parents,
by the time you've hired Sun Tzu as your strategist, you've already kind of committed yourself to a certain way of thinking, or you've already committed yourself to war.
You already make decision already. Because
Yeah.
You hire Sun Tzu, you are not hiring Mencius, right? Or you hire Han Feizi, which is another legalist. They will tell you a different story. They will tell you build on a government, right? How to punish the people, reward the people, have your law legal system ready, so everything is ready. So you already make decision on that. And to this chapter 5, it's no more win-win situation, how much it costs. Basis is talking about how. Okay.
Yeah.
More how to do it. Right.
Which on that point, I've noticed like this book, as well as like Machiavelli's The Prince, they're different than a lot of philosophy books, because they focus more on the question of how, rather than like these questions of like why, or like they're not really asking like about the metaphysics of war or about the morality of war. It's more of like a user's manual of just like, all right, if you're in a war, like how can you win? Like it seems, is that your interpretation too? It's more practical.
Because I'm glad that you talk about Machiavelli, because I just try to find the name. Because Machiavelli, we all know he wrote the book called The Prince, but he has another book, right? Called, I just try to find the name, Discourse on, which we talk about totally opposite thing, talk about moral, about, so depend on what situation, because that day he wrote The Prince for, what's his name? Dimitri, Dimitri family, okay? So, because he wrote them, but when he act as a professor, act as a scholar, he write the moral. Doesn't mean that he doesn't have the moral sense. Just like when you teach your kids how to play chess, it's different than when you teach your kids how to treat your brother. That's a different.
Right.
I think that we should not just single a view on the Sun Tzu. Probably Sun Tzu is like very moral, right? He talked to his student or talked to his children, right? He teach them, oh, never cheat, be honest. Probably he do this way. Only thing we see is this part, because he is being hired, okay, as a military consultant,
right?
Just like Machiavelli, right? He's talking to the prince. He's not talking to his kids. Okay.
Right. Absolutely. Okay.
So if we go to number 5, I think that's the thing. One concept I like to introduce is so-called Chinese called "shi." Okay, "shi." Okay, so the translation is latent energy, potential, power, momentum, influence, tendency. Okay, so
Okay. Yeah.
that's the words you talk about. Okay, you can imagine on the last chapter you talk about the water holding. Okay, hold it there. That's heaven, or in the Aristotelian's word is potential energy.
Potential energy. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah.
Kind of like this. So if you want to use the metaphor, will be used. I think it's in this text. Is like torrent which rolls stone along in the course. Okay, or like the bending of a crossbow. You bend the crossbow. How do you say a crossbow? Okay, and shooting the arrow by the holding there. That's the so-called "shi." Okay, so this kind of concept is being used in here. Also in the legalism system, they talk about the emperor should have "shi." Okay, if you play the Go game, the Chinese chess game. Okay, if you hire an Asian, including Korean, Japan master to teach you, they will tell you. Okay, for sure they will tell you "shi." Okay, that means when you play game, you have to lay out your goal, okay, in certain way, so you have your own "shi." Okay, have the potentiality of winning. You have to hold this one. So,
and is that just for my kind of clarification? Is that kind of like you're kind of working, so like how it might relate to terrain, you're kind of like working with the terrain rather than against it, like like when he talks about you always want to be uphill of your opponent, would that be working with C or no? Is that a different concept?
that's correct. So Chinese like to follow the "shi." Okay, so you don't do against that one. Just like you say, you have to. So "shi" doesn't mean yourself. Okay, then also remember we talk about the sky, we talk about the land, right? So you cannot just like all wishful thinking. Okay, oh, I'm to build the strongest army. I have built my own muscle. I'm the strongest man in the world. You are not thinking about. You have to think about the whole overall situation, including something you cannot control, right? Okay, and know yourself, know your enemy, and then you have everything ready, and that's the readiness. Okay.
Okay, awesome. This is, I think, a much better term, because the English equivalent that I was thinking was maybe something like efficiency, like we were talking about earlier about, you don't attack the enemy when they're behind fortified walls just because it's not efficient. But I think this captures it better. It's you're going against if you're attacking either an enemy who's uphill, if you're attacking an enemy behind fortified walls, you're kind of okay.
So I think here they talk about the concept so-called "shi," right? And then they talk about the combination of strategy. Okay, right now you talk about a little bit strategy. You have different tactic to use, and they do different And here Sun Tzu used the example like he said they only have 5 flavor in our tongue, but we can with different combination you have unlimited kind of food, right? They only have a 5 color in the clothes, but with the combination you have all beautiful clothes, beautiful decoration. They only have 5 tones. Okay, unlike in Western music, have a 7 C D E F G A B 7 tones. Chinese only have 5 tones. Okay, but doesn't mean Chinese doesn't have the beautiful music because with the combination, okay, you can make unlimited kind of beautiful message. So he tried to tell like they have a strategy, but you don't need the last way, but with different combination, you can.
And in my translation, he says there are only 2 moves, essentially. You have the indirect or a direct, but it's the combinations that are what make each battle unique.
Yes.
So you can do a direct attack or you do an indirect attack, and but like you were saying, it's the different combinations that make each thing unique, just like it's the different combinations of those 5 notes that make each song unique.
Yeah, I think I get your the translation. You do the direct and the indirect. That's the translation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Chinese word. Okay, I think I will say that's a. I should not say wrong because you cannot find the right word.
Okay.
Basically, Chinese will use so-called 正 and 齐. Okay, 正 means formal, predictable, the right way.
Okay.
I think they translate as direct. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
齐 means unexpected. Okay,
Okay.
so you totally unexpected. That means wrong, but totally unexpected, abnormal. Okay, and new. Okay, so not the so you do this kind of combination. Okay, sometimes you sometimes use qi. Okay, sometimes expected way. Sometimes okay, so you have to do the combination. Then they give you only 2. You can make a different thing, and they just like all the Chinese philosophy, they like use metaphor to explain the philosophy, right? So basically talk about 5 color, 5 flavor, 5 tones, and you can make music just like this, because the way to combine these 5 color, 5 tone, they have the problem. Just if you think about like music, right? If you totally follow the tone, the way of the composition, you can make a good music. But sometimes you add a little bit art, right? You bring the new way of feeling on the music. I'm not a musician, but I kind of like, think about some music is like you feel totally expected. That's beautiful. But sometimes you add a little bit,
Yeah.
A little bit different.
That's it. Yeah. Like you wouldn't really want to listen to a composition that is just unexpected. It would probably be pretty jarring. It'd probably sound something like, like 12 tone, like modern music or something, where it's just constant things that are unexpected. But if you were just listening to something that was composed of things you were expecting, you'd probably get bored. It'd be like listening to like a children's song. So the
and then you
best,
totally unexpected, and unexpected become expected. I think that's the C.
And that's probably where the art of war comes in.
Yeah,
like maybe that's how. It's
ahead.
more of an art than a science in terms of like, putting together this, combination of direct and indirect attacks is maybe similar to putting together the perfect combination to create like a beautiful song.
Yes, and that I'm in the computer field, so I have to argue with my friend who we are working on the AI, right? He kind of think about like AI will replace all the art, okay? Because now it's pretty good. They can make pretty good picture, okay, painting, okay, compose music, pretty good. But my argument is never, okay, never praise human artists, because whatever they make it as norm, you always can bring, something unexpected, because doesn't matter how expected AI can make, doesn't matter how unexpected AI can create, I can over unexpected one more time.
Yeah, right. I like that. Yeah, the it maybe doesn't have the like human irrationality factor. At least yet. Yeah.
I'm more on the freedom. I believe human free will, so that's why I stand on this side.
Cool, man.
Okay, so one more thing before ending on chapter 5, we talk about the clever general. Okay, you're looking for the effect of shi, so-called combined energy or momentum, but not too much depend on the individual. Okay, so you need to look at the shi. Okay, what's the situation? Shi also include the situation. Okay, but so he's talking about not just. You have to focus on this one. Cannot just like thinking about who the person. You have to think about the overall. Then pick the person who can fit in this kind of. So in a way, you can think about go to the war zone, right? What's the situation? You it's not necessary just hire the best people to fight. You depend on the situation. You should choose the right situation, right? You don't have a person to change the 事. Okay, you have the 事 based on this. You choose a person to work on that. Okay, so that's this.
Yeah.
So 因为事 is something you can prepare, you can get you ready, but it's not all you can do, right? So like we said, it depends on the weather, on the terrain, on the enemy, on everything. But I ready myself, and based on this, I will choose the right person to lead. Okay, kind of situation. I don't have the person to create or fight to change this. You don't do that. You have this one ready and have the people to fit this one. And
which that's another kind of key theme that I saw throughout this whole text was, the kind of adaptability factor that, there's not really like a one size fits all equation that you can just plug into every battle and it will work, because there's all of these different variables that you have to account for. The weather, general strength of the army, like all of these things. So yeah, the good general is the one that can, take all of that in and make the best plan for that specific situation.
Okay, we can move on the chapter 6, right?
Yeah.
I like to, Zach, can you read your translation on the title? How are you going to, how does, I'd like to know.
The title for 6 for me was Weak Points and Strong.
Yeah, okay. So that's another two concepts in Chinese, so-called 虚实, right? So I think most of translation, I think, called weak point and the strong. Okay. So here he talk about you hide your weak and and find out what's the weak point and the strong point, avoid enemy's strong point, take their weak point, and you have to hide your weak point and the strong point. So I like to use the different metaphor is egg and pebble, right? So instead of weak and because the Chinese word called 虚 and 实, which has no exact. 虚 means you can call weak, but you can call fake, you can call negative, you can call passive. 实 means solid, okay, real, okay, means honest, okay.
Yeah.
So I think the best way to, my opinion, the best way to translate is egg and the pebble, okay.
Could I take a crack out from last time of
that's
my understanding?
So last time I talked about it. Yeah.
The way I understood it, an egg and a pebble look pretty similar from the outside. So if you imagine, your army's wall is made up of both eggs and pebbles, and a good army would have eggs and pebbles alongside of each other, and the enemy wouldn't be able to tell which one's a pebble and which one's an egg. So that is kind of represents your strengths and weaknesses, your strengths being the pebbles, your eggs being the weaknesses. And similarly, you're kind of looking at your opponent's eggs and pebbles, and you're trying to determine which one is an egg and which is a pebble, and, attack the eggs and, avoid the pebbles. Is that more or less?
Yeah. That's exactly. I'm thinking, because I think this one is egg and the pebble probably much better than weak point and.
Right, because you don't know what your enemy's weak point is, or
it look alike. Pebble and egg.
They look alike,
right?
Because a good opponent does a good job of disguising their weaknesses as strengths, and vice versa.
Yeah, even I'm very strong, I can destroy the pebble, but I still want to destroy the egg because save energy, right?
Yeah,
I can do it more efficiently, right? So and then nobody can have all pebble because you all have some weak point. So so you got to have everybody have its own egg. Okay, so you got to find the way to lay out your leg. So your egg, so your enemy will not know that's the egg. They will think, oh, that must be pebble. Let me try different thing, right? So,
and this might be in a later chapter. I might be jumping a bit, but he does say too that if you can keep it a secret from your enemy where you're going to attack, then they are going to have to guard everywhere. And because they're not able to concentrate their forces, they're kind of having to protect themselves at every point. They're going to be weak all over. So I guess the goal is to try to make it so your enemy is very spread out. So they have just a whole bunch of eggs. Very few pebbles.
Because when you spread out, you got to use a lot of egg, right?
Yeah,
because
right.
you don't have so many. Let's assume you don't have so many pebbles. Okay, that's costly.
Yeah.
So even in the real world, egg is costly. But
okay, absolutely.
I think basics, that's it, and the others are a little bit more detailed. You can see the text become more detailed. Talk about use water, different. It's a chapter 6. Yeah. You have anything on this chapter you think is
on 7 or on 6?
We are on 6.
The only other thing I was going to add from 6, it made me think of what I've heard termed the golden rule of combat. I think this came much later. I was reading in a fairly modern book called Meditations on Violence. But for him, he said the golden rule of combat is your strongest force aimed at your enemy's greatest weakness at their maximum time of imbalance or surprise, which I think lines up a lot with what Sun Tzu is talking. You're using your strongest. Yeah.
You have to make sure you use your strongest, your pebble to attack their egg.
Pebble to talk.
Yeah, the egg, right? So you can always easily win. He's not talking about a great war. Okay, he's not talking about winning. Okay, even it's so great war, as long as you win. Okay, I don't care. It's a great war, not great war.
Absolutely. There's one other thing I thought of too. Have you played the game Stratego?
No.
It's a board game called Stratego, where it's a military game and you set up pieces. It's kind of like a chessboard, and your pieces it's kind of like Guess Who. Like you can see your pieces, but it's just blank for your opponent and they can see theirs. But basically you have all of these different things like a general and a bomb and all this. So it's kind of like that in that you are constantly trying to make them think that they are attacking a strong opponent when it's a weak one, and you're wanting them to think they're attacking a weak opponent when it's a strong one. So I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things you've had to have played the game, but
I can see the same flavor. We are doing that. Okay, so so what's your translation on the last sentence? Very last
of page 6, or excuse me, chapter 6. Yeah, I have the last sentence. The 5 elements, water, fire, wood, metal, earth, are not always equally prominent. The 4 seasons make way for each other in turn. There are short days and long. The moon has its periods of waning and waxing. Yeah, so basically talk about all the change. You have to adapt your change. Oh, okay. So they start to bring the 5 elements in. That's the popular during that time. If you see Chinese medicine, today still you talk about 5 elements, right? Okay, so it's a little mystical, but basically that's they believe, right? Okay, so I got you. That makes sense. That makes sense. Very serious word by word. Okay, some people do this way. Okay, the metal, the water, the wood, the earth. Okay, and those are the things that are the variables that change from battle to battle that you have to account for. Is that? Well, that's why some people will take very serious on this one. Right? Some people will just say, like me, I would just say, that's just metaphor. Just like 4 elements in the Greek, right? Talk about air, fire, air, earth, and water. And the Chinese talk about metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, right? Okay. And the 5 elements. Okay, there's a difference on which one will produce this one, which one will kill the other one, and the mountain
mountain belong to this one. South is water, north is mountain, east is they have all kind of combination, and you can go to very detailed. Some people would be interested on that. I say that's
Gotcha.
great. Okay, so you depend on the person you talk to. If you talk to me, I will say, oh, that's a metaphor. You just represent some metaphysical thinking. Okay, that's it. But some people may say very, very serious. Okay, your liver is belong to wood. Okay, and it's reflected to them. Let's say the which star, which is reflected, which location, which direction, what kind of relationship. Some people may go this detail even on today. Okay, so but I don't want.
Okay.
In my opinion, but basics, that's a very different way of thinking on that.
Interesting. Cool.
So we can move on 7.
Chapter 7.
Yeah, 7, you can see it can become more lower level, right? So
yeah, we're getting into like specific strategies now, specific tactics.
But we're still talking to the general. That's put this way. We're still talking to the general. Okay, the chief, commander in chief, right? So chapter 7 is contending army maneuvering. Okay, so basically talk about how to exercise. Okay, so here talk about the distance. I think that's important, right? I think everybody know, but during that time they already told them, if you wage a war, it's 100 miles. I just use the miles. Okay, 100 miles away, you only have 10% people arrive. 50 miles away, only half people arrive. If you are doing like 30 miles, only 2/3 arrive. So yeah.
So I gathered from that he's saying kind of you can't expect unreasonable things from your men. You know, if you're going to ask your men to march twice as much as they're used to marching, like not all of them are going to make it. Is that more or less it?
I kind of have to disagree on this thinking, because the original text, I think he's talking about if you go 100 miles to try to profit, okay, it's your general will be captured, okay, and the people will get tired, okay. So I think here he talk about the logistic, because at the end they talk about like no food, okay, no storage, and your people. So I think he's talking about logistic, because it's too far away. So the people cannot survive over there. So
makes sense. Yeah, again, it kind of goes back to that like efficiency and not expanding energy unnecessarily.
Yes. Okay. And here a little bit interesting, a little bit more. You can see the Chinese philosophy thinking here. Here talk about ethos, the character, 6 features, right? What kind of military you are looking for. I think it's interesting, but again, because my interest is more on the philosophy. Okay.
Yeah.
So here he describe the 6 ethos. I don't know. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Did your translation talk about like the wind, forest, fire, mountain, cloudy day, and the thunderbolt? Number 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4th paragraph in the middle.
No, I don't have that.
Difficult to translate. So I kind of work hard to figure out how to bring it to. Because all this, the reason I talk this one is because these words, these 6 things are become a common language, common saying during the Chinese language. Okay, but doesn't mean military sense, but become the daily life. Okay.
Okay.
So basically talk about 6. I call it ethos or characters. Okay, your military. Okay, your army need to be first speedy like the wind. Okay. You can imagine this is the metaphor. Okay. Compactness like the forest.
Okay.
Radiant and plundering like fire.
Okay.
Okay. And immovability like a mountain.
Okay. Makes sense.
Unpredictable. Okay, like cloudy days.
Okay. I like that one.
striking like a thunderbolt.
Gotcha. So
Okay.
these are the kind of metaphors for how like what an army should be like.
Yes.
And you're saying maybe it has become something that's just now a common sayings in China.
Saying, yeah. I can share my experience because in Taiwan we need to have 2 years military service, right? And then when I was as over there in the training as a cadet, okay, during the training, there was 6 months training as a cadet. So the sergeant tell you is like you walk like wind, okay, stay like a pine tree, stand like a pine tree.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and sleep like a bow, like arrow bow. Or you have to be, even you sleep, you have to ready, jump up, right?
That doesn't sound like very restful sleep.
Yeah.
Because you got to be ready to get up and go.
That's the metaphor we are using here. Okay?
I was thinking when I was reading, I was thinking of Muhammad Ali, who used to say he floats like a butterfly, stings like a bee.
Yeah, that's right.
The boxer.
Right. Yeah. Kind of this kind of the thinking. But you can see Muhammad Ali is more on the moving side, right? He doesn't talk about the immobility, the stable side.
Yeah, right? He's not like a mountain.
Like a mountain, right? But these are more on the different way, right? Not only on the attack, he focus more on the stability, right? So you will talk about like a mountain, right? Like a forest, like a pine tree. Okay, so yeah, that's the part it's talking about.
I like that, kind of having those like different visual, those metaphors in there.
Yeah, and then this chapter is a little bit long, and then because long for another reason is I think that's interesting on the cultural philosophy side.
Okay.
You talk about how to dominate the enemy. Okay, so he provides 4 different ways. One is the qi. Okay, today everybody know what I'm talking about when I talk about qi. Okay, you have to control the qi, the might, okay, the strength, and the form of the military. So if you want to win, you do that. You think about you are the general. You look at your army, right? You think about the qi. Okay, the qi of the whatever you think is qi. What's their mind, what they are thinking, okay? What's their strength, okay? What physical they can do, and the form, because it's they do it in the land, right? You have to how to lay out your military. That's important. So that's the 4 things he's talking about, and a little bit more detail. And Sun Tzu talk about the art of warfare. They said ask you to think about that'll become much detail, right? So talk about 8 no's. I don't.
Okay.
Did you have it? Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sentence, right? The last sentence. I don't know how do you get this one. How does the
right? Well, I can maybe read these. You said so. It's don't advance upwards. Don't attack enemy when their back is against hills. Don't follow the enemy when they simulate retreat. Don't attack enemy when their morale is high. Don't take the enemy's baits. Don't interfere with the army when they're returning home. Leave an outlet when you surround the enemy, and don't press the desperate enemy. So maybe to talk about a few of these, because some of them aren't super intuitive. Some people would say like, why wouldn't you want to surround an enemy, or why wouldn't you want to attack an enemy when their back is against the hill?
Yeah, I did last week. Interesting, and they replace your thinking.
Right.
Yes,
so it's the same idea of why you wouldn't want to corner an animal, because they are going to attack you because they're basically fighting for their life. So if you've taken away your enemy's ability to retreat or get away, they are going to fight you with all their might because they're fighting for their lives. So again, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're having to fight somebody who is has that kind of motivation.
Yeah, and then if you look at the number 7, right? I talk about different outlet when you surround the enemy, right?
Yeah.
you can think about like situation. You don't want to put your enemy in a desperate situation, so they will fight to the death, right?
Yeah.
But another way to talk about, like some people want to interpret in this way, is Chinese are very nice because they always give somebody space. Have a moral sense. We don't know what's the meaning, but it could be.
Okay. Yeah. That's
Basically, that's the spatial, and it's also become a become a common saying during the Chinese daily conversation. You always give some in the court. Okay, usually you will say don't overkill, right?
yeah.
Okay, if you know you want, you don't overkill. If you overkill basics, you have the problem, right? So basically, you know you want. So same situation. You are surrounded. Let them live, okay? Because it's good for them, also good for you. Basically, I think that's the.
I think the only reason maybe I have the more cynical interpretation, which is that you should leave them a place to leave so that they don't fight as hard, is because, at least in my translation in chapter 11, he says to basically do the opposite when it comes to your own soldiers. So in my chapter 11, he said, quote, throw your soldiers into positions whence there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight. So I got the sense that he's saying you can use this principle the opposite way too. So, don't allow your own men to anywhere that they can retreat, so that they're going to have to fight harder and fight to the death.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and the number 6 also interesting to look at. So it said don't interfere with an enemy when they are returning home.
I like that one. Yeah,
it really makes sense, and it shows the moral sense. Okay, the moral part of this one. I think that makes sense. Okay, because come on, they want to go home, right? Well, there's no reason. Yeah,
but there could also be just a pure pragmatic argument for that too, in the sense that, like, if they're already on their way home, they're gonna fight like hell to get there. It's the same way if you're, I don't know, you're talking to your colleague on their way out the door on a Friday, and you're starting to, ask them about some work situation, like, they're not going to cooperate.
Yeah, that's right.
Because their mind's already on, like, the football game or whatever's going on later after work.
Yeah, so I think the last 3 is very interesting to pay attention. You can have your own judgment, which one is what's the meaning. But actually, I think it's very interesting to take a deep look and think about why Sun Tzu talk about this.
One other one I wanted to maybe highlight was number 3. Don't follow the enemy when they simulate retreat, which I think is similar to number 5, which is don't take enemy baits, which is if your enemy is looking like their retreats, like, it might be a trap. So, you kind of have to be cognizant that your enemy is also trying to trick you, and what looks like an egg might be a pebble.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I think that's that's why I see this chapter 7 is interesting to look at. You talk about the 6 different features, the ethos, like wind, forest, the fire, okay, and the dominate the enemy, right? Talk about qi, mind, strength, and formation, I should call, and the 8 nodes you have to think about it. So I think this one is interesting to know ancient Chinese culture. When I talk about ancient Chinese culture, because you will figure out that even it's ancient, but for 2,000 years, it still leave the trace in today, right?
Yeah.
At least I feel this way. When I come to America and look back my own culture, kind of feel like, okay, that's the difference. And when I spend time to study the Greek philosophy, and I start to Western European stuff, start to know why Americans behave this way. Very subtle, Okay, we all wear the same clothes, okay, and read the same book, use the same computer, but there's a subtle difference. Just like Muhammad Ali, he didn't talk about immobility, but in China they will talk about immobility. So
Yeah. Cool. You want to keep going? Chapter 8.
yeah, let's move on to chapter 8. Let me see. What's your did chapter 8 I will consider the last part for advice for the general. Okay. Then after chapter 8, we will move in on the more details. Okay. So chapter 8 basics. In my note, I will sum up as like they talk about 5 not necessaries. Okay. So that means something you have to say no to that, right?
Yeah.
Some road you do you have this translation number?
I've got
Some road you don't follow, right?
Yeah.
Some armies you don't attack. Some city you don't besiege. Okay, you don't try to besiege them, and some position you don't contest. Right? You don't always like there's some yes, some no. You have to know. Last one is more important. Okay. I will translate as some orders from the king are not to be obeyed. Okay.
Yeah.
That's very important because when you are outside fighting, right? You don't follow the book. Okay, it's not like okay, oh, here's the way we can go. Here's the enemy, we attack. That's the right position. I occupy. One more important, it's not all the order you follow. Okay, from your king. Okay.
And do you think the reason for that, one of the reasons I thought of is I know like in warfare, things are constantly changing and moving really fast, and there's just not enough time to kind of relay every important decision back to the king or the sovereign or the president or whoever. Yeah. And then so you kind of have to give the general like the authority to make calls in real time. Is that kind of the reason, or is the reason more that just
the reason? Basically, is more bi-directional. Okay, here you talk about the not. I think in the early chapter I missed the he talk about don't. Here he talk about because he talking to the general. He tell them not all order from the king you have to follow. Okay, yeah. And then I think in early chapter he talk about the you should not control as a prince. You should not
like micromanage
the man. I don't think he used micromanage.
Yeah. that's the
word. I think it's leave the space for the general, something like this. So it's bi-directional. Okay. Yeah. So that's I think that's very important, right? Same as
totally
daily life, not only in the military, right? You have to, if you are manager, you ask your people or your
leaders.
Team leaders, right? You should give them certain, room. And the same thing, the leaders don't follow, every command from the manager.
Right. Kind of trust your people to make good decisions. Don't micromanage. Don't leave them some space.
Yeah. When I was working as a team leader, I remember one of the important message I learned or I practice is manage your manager.
Okay, that's kind of maybe the opposite of that.
Well, because you instead of not being managed, you have to manage him, so fit the right information he want to listen. So you create a space you can work, and then after he see the result, he'll be happy. So
I got you. I like that.
So that's number A, and
there was one in 8 that I wanted to hit on. You said that one of the lessons in 8 is to not rely on the likelihood of the enemies not coming, but on our readiness to receive them. Yeah. And the way that my translation had this was, let's see, where's it? The art of war teaches us to rely not on the likelihood of the enemy not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him. Okay, so cool. Pretty much the same translation. Yeah. And that's, I really like that. It's actually similar to Machiavelli says a similar thing. Like basically don't, he says basically like to expect the storm to come and to prepare for the storm, build dikes, build canals, prepare for the storm. don't uh, don't pretty much bank on the fact that your enemy isn't going to attack.
Yeah.
Expect them to, and have a plan for when it happens.
Yeah, and this one also become very common language during the daily conversation. Not say daily, but a lot of conversation or newspaper. If you read Chinese paper, sometimes it's newspaper. Sometimes you will quote.
Oh, okay, cool.
Even most of people probably doesn't know or not unaware it's from Sun Tzu. Because sometimes I feel like Westerner or people outside the culture probably should read Sun Tzu or Chinese ancient text more than the people who already use it, because people use that, it's in your blood. Okay.
Yeah.
You know or you don't know, it not much difference. Okay. But
right.
For people outside, if you read this one, you will see, oh, aha, that's why the way thing you will see the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's already kind of become a part of the culture in certain Asian countries, but in other Western countries, we may have to go back to the source to figure out where some of the stuff comes from.
Yes, same as me when I come here 30 years ago, and a lot of things, I'm religion, daily behavior, moral, education, it always feel a little bit foreign, right? So a lot of politics, but until that's my experience, but that means always, but until I go more deep on the philosophy, on the ancient, on the history, I start to understand, you say not just like out of blue, you have a reason, because from your father, from your grandfather, from great-great-grandfather, they leave the trace to you, so.
Yeah, I've noticed that with like Christianity. I think a lot of us Americans just like assume that everybody understands some like basics and the stories in the Bible, and it's just certain parts of the world, it's just not part of the culture in the same way that it is here. So yeah, it's good to just know that like that your understanding of something isn't necessarily
yeah, that's a fundamental. A lot of
Yeah.
call the existentialism. Existential condition is different.
Yeah. Cool. Shall we continue?
Before
yeah.
there's something probably not so. Well, it's probably I don't know. It's on the last sentence. How do you feel on the last paragraph? You think too cool, too cold?
Of chapter 8?
Chapter 8, very last paragraph, talk about the 5 kind of calendars. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. It
says
fail. Okay. So you talk about reckless bravery. Okay. Lead to destruction. Right.
Yep.
So okay. Cowardice leads to captivity. Okay? Hasty temper leads to be insulted. Okay.
Yeah.
Seeking honor. Okay. That's also important. They talk about 5 different kind of commander you should avoid. Okay? So just remember, right now you talk about to the general. General is going to send the commander to the field. So you talk about what kind of commander? Okay?
Yeah.
Reckless. Okay. Hasty temper, like Achilles. Okay.
Yeah. You don't want a reckless. You don't want a reckless commander. You don't want a cowardly one. You don't want with a
and
hasty
also don't
temper.
want the commander seeking honor. That's also dangerous, right? Because he think about his reputation too much. Okay. The last one, caring people lead too much unnecessary worries. Okay.
So they need to be a little bit detached from their soldiers, from their men, because if they're, if they're too close, then they're going to be too, they're going to be worried all the time.
I don't think he talked about the soldier. Okay. The word I can use in Chinese. Okay. He talked about I mean love people. That's the word. That's the example. Only 2 words. Love people. And I believe people means the regular people. Okay. Not means soldier. Okay.
Okay.
So of course it's controversial. Okay. So what? Okay. So but basics, that's the part that he's talking about. Okay, so
Gotcha.
if you too much love, benevolence,
Mm.
okay, that's the problem. Okay. Soft heart, tender heart.
Right, right. You can't get too
So,
attached.
so you can think of these 5 advice. Okay, that's withhold our judgment. He's right, he's wrong. Chinese culture, that's withhold this one. But think about how he think about this. Think about you are the general. You want to choose a commander to fight, right? You think 5 kind of people want to avoid. Right?
That's probably true too of like, this could probably apply to most leadership roles.
Yeah,
When it comes to like a good
you
boss.
need kind of coldness or
Yeah.
detachment, right? Under this one, right?
Yeah.
It's a problem. Same situation we will see is the surgeon. Okay, you don't do surgeon on your kids or don't do surgery on your relative, right? What's the reason? You laugh too much. I think that's the reason.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You'll be afraid to take the necessary risks.
Yeah. So how are you going to put the first knife on your daughter's belly? You cannot do it, right?
Right. Well, and part of the thing of being a general or a commander is sometimes you have to sacrifice some of your people for
virtual. You have to sacrifice. Yeah. So to me, I think instead of the judge the teacher morally, I would say it's very practical, right?
Yeah.
To think about, because you already go to the war. Okay, you already go to the war, which is not moral already. Sun Tzu told you at the beginning. Okay, it's not moral totally. Okay.
Yeah.
So you are doing this, and then you cannot still withhold all kind of virtue you want to hold.
Yeah.
Damage it's necessary. Okay.
Right. There was one, the one part that kind of shocked me. I'm jumping a little bit, but in the last chapter when they're talking about spies, one of the spies is called, in my translation, a doomed spy. So this would be somebody who is one of your spies who you give false information to, false plans to, knowing that they are going to be captured by your enemy and that they will then give that false information to the enemy. Misdirecting your enemy, and then your enemy, after they realize that it was not accurate information, will then kill that person. So in that sense, I mean, you know, that is like the ultimate sacrifice. You've decided this person who is of my army is going to be, sacrificed to the enemy in order to deceive them.
Yeah. So well, we can talk about detail on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you will see, the 13th chapter, you should not jump in around. You should read it.
Right.
For the most of Chinese ancient texts, Tao Te Ching, Confucius analog, you can just pick up any sentence and start to read because the order is randomly. But this one is not. This one is special. Okay. Even Tao Te Ching and Lao Tzu, 81 chapter, you can pick up any one. There's no relation. Well, the relation is not that strong. Okay, so you can read anyone and quote anyone for any place. But I think this one is different because they are fun. If I think so far you probably already feel the difference, right? So
sure.
And the data, just like you said, that's on the last chapter. It's very detailed. Okay, how to do this one and talk about setting fire, burn the people, burn the thing. So it's very detailed already.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, my only point was if you had too much love for your soldiers, you probably couldn't make them a doomed spy.
That's true. But I just bring up the original text that the love people. Okay. So in Chinese common words, it talk about, are you familiar with the word called the benevolence? Ren, that's the Chinese Confucius teaching called Ren, which is benevolence or love.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not misogyny, but that's the Chinese word is the woman's benevolence or woman's love.
Like is like kind of unconditional love, like a motherly love, unconditional love. Is that?
Well, that's the thing he tried to avoid. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the kind of laugh we try to avoid.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Not
avoid.
unconditional love. That's too religious. Okay. So
Okay.
basically, we talk about the love and kind of like spoil the kids, right? When we talk about
Ah.
women's love, we talk about the mother spoil the kids. Okay. Okay. So
Mm.
same thing here. He talk about 5 kind of commander you should avoid. One is love people. Okay.
Mm.
They will cause problem because love. You care about, you don't want damage. So that could be the problem, right?
Gotcha. Gotcha. Awesome. You want to keep going? Chapter 9?
Okay, so let's go to chapter 9. So the last 5 chapter basics, we, of course, if somebody are very interested, you can go to very deep and every single word you can find out. And then I will say the last 5 chapters, yeah, probably occupy health of the writing. Okay, so okay, so it's much more. So that's a lot of very detailed thing, and I don't think we should go to that detail. And the chapter number 9 talk about the fielding the army, right? The army on the march when you send the army out and the army out. So I don't know what part you are interested, but here
Well,
I lay out is his. He talk about 4 kind of warfare, right? On the mountain, on the river, on the lake, on the field.
so what I gathered from this chapter, he's talking about different kinds of terrain and how to navigate different types of terrain. I get the sense when he's saying, when you're on bad terrain, like you're in a swamp or you're crossing a river or you're going over a mountain, you want to, he says, quote, pass quickly over mountains and keep in the neighborhood of valleys. So you want to, if you have to go on bad terrain, you want to get out of there as soon as possible so that you're always, you're not kind of putting yourself in a vulnerable place to be attacked.
Yes, and he also he has also go to very detail, right? How to tell you your military is hungry, okay, and how to tell they are thirsty, they are tired, okay, they are like egg. I mean the weak point, okay. How to tell they are scared, okay,
Yeah.
and then he see in some situation because the commander is not strong enough, right? And then sometimes because the commander is too strong. So and this, what situation that means they are exhausted because they eat horse. Okay.
Yeah.
They are exhausted, and then so and if people have rumor, okay, keep talking about the secret. They talk about 20 different signs on the situation. So that's a very detailed. So if you are interested, you probably can bring any translation.
Well, so we probably don't need to get too much into like the specifics of like, eating horse and all of these specifics. But one of the things that's maybe a little more universal, I wanted to read this quote at the end of the chapter. He says, quote, if soldiers are punished before they have grown attached to you, they will not prove submissive. And then he says, if when the soldiers have become attached to you, punishments are not enforced, they will still be useless. Therefore, soldiers must be treated in the first instance with humanity, but kept under control by iron discipline. This is one of the certain roads to victory.
Yeah, that's very good sentence. Yeah.
So, and he says somewhere else, not in that quote, that like basically, if you don't enforce your rules, your soldiers will become like spoiled children and just be useless. They'll just walk all over you.
Yeah,
So,
but if your soldier is not like your children, you don't discipline them, right? You don't discipline your neighbor's kids. Okay, you only discipline your kids. Okay?
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's the line we have to make it clear, right? So here,
Absolutely.
the first sentence, if you the commander and remember here we are already talk about the commander, okay? The commander and the soldier, okay? If your relation you just new here, they don't feel the belonging, okay?
Yeah, they have to feel attached.
Yeah, that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
If they belong you like a family, you don't discipline them. That's another problem. And I think that that rule is very, very true, right? And it's very useful in the any situation in today, right? In the business, in the family, in the company, right? That's all
Right. Your like employees have to respect you and, be attached to you in some way, or at least want to trust you and want to do what you say. If you're just an asshole tyrant, they're not going to obey.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to be disciplinary at times. Otherwise, they're just going to walk all over you.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else? Otherwise, we can go to
No, let's keep going.
There's a lot of detail. Basically, for example, 20 signs. Actually, personally, I was interested to look at the 20 signs, not because I want to learn how to do something, but I think that you know a lot of culture. Okay, that's my interest. But if you are interested, you can look at. We don't have to go all the detail. So we can go to chapter 10. All right.
Yeah.
Chapter 10 is talking about the land, the terrain, the conformation of the land. Remember on the 5 principle, on the 1到天地. Okay. Again, the third one talk about the land. Here is talking about. So again, this one is a long chapter, and then another category. Okay, so Zach, you can bring what you are interested. But here, my summary will be: they have the 6 terrains with the 6 principles, right, to connect. Okay, they talk about different way, and they talk about 6 kind of disaster, calamities. Okay, fight and you can watch. Okay, so I think that's
and these are saying basically there's just 6 types of terrain you can be in, and a lot of it's depending on if you're on your ground or the enemy's ground or somewhere in between, and I gathered too that depending on where you are, like it's going to alter what your plans should be. So again, this kind of goes back to you have to be adaptable to whatever terrain that you're fighting on.
So and they talk about 6 different kind of, I think it's a calamity, right? Different sign, okay. So but I personally, I'm more interested on the last 3 or the last 2 paragraphs, right? Talk about the general, talk about the general, right? And here you talk about the general who advances without coveting fame or retreat without fearing disgrace. Okay, I think that's important. That when you commander to out, right? You make sure.
This is saying he should not covet fame and should
not.
Okay, right? Okay, yeah.
Imagine say who advance without, okay, coveting fame or without retreat without fearing disgrace. I think this is really more Chinese way, because you talk about Chinese, like ancient China, like you use negative. Okay. So,
right.
Okay, so so I think we got the message, right? So winning is the only thing, not your fan. Okay. When you need to retreat, you retreat. You should not worry.
Yeah.
Okay. So and then talk about how to treat people. Okay, so you talk about if you treat the people, the soldier, like your children, and they will follow you to the deepest body, right? If them like your own beloved son, they will stand by you even unto the death. That we talk about. You have to treat people this way.
Right.
And then finally talk about same thing again. Okay, as in I think in the chapter 4, talk about know yourself and know others. Right, basically it's repeat the same message.
Right. Yeah.
To the commander, basically. Right. So
know yourself and know the enemy.
Yeah. So
or know the other. We said. Yeah.
Know the other. Okay. Yeah, know the other. Yeah. So basically, the same message tell the prince, and right now they repeat the same message tell the commander.
Okay, awesome. We keep going. Chapter 11.
11. Okay. Chinese version is very long. I think that's the longest one. Okay, so but the name is 9 kinds of ground. See, right now it's talking about ground. So here they talk about different kind of ground, right? Dispersive ground, for easy ground, contentious ground, open ground, ground with intersection, serious ground, difficult ground. The desperate ground, this different ground and different strategy to fight. Okay. And one thing I'd like to talk about here is the snake. Okay. I don't know, do you understand?
Yes, I didn't quite grasp this. So I'm curious about this. What is the snake military formation?
Okay, because ancient Chinese, probably even to the 10th century before during the time before Genghis Khan invaded China or occupy, okay, during that time still use the same way, okay, because based on the land, right? So the strategy you have to use is the formation, okay, of you put the I think same as in the Alexander the Great. He's also good to lay out where to put the cavalry, where you put your weapon, how to lay out. So I think this chapter basically spend a lot of time, a lot of text about. That's why the Sun Tzu lay out the nine different ground, right? And then in this and a different way to lay out your military. Of course, it's not applicable for today's situation, but bring up the snake, okay, because it talks about one formation, right? You lay out like a snake, right? Like a long snake, they call, what's the name? Ran, right? The name, they give the name of the snake, okay? So like a long snake, you attack the head, the tail will attack you. You attack the tail, the head will attack you.
Okay.
The middle, then both will attack you. So basically, it's metaphor talk about the snake. So I don't know how applicable for today's case, but to me, it's interesting to know, okay, the ancient culture, okay, because the way they do it and the way they thinking is layout. You can imagine you have, let's say you have a 10,000, so you lay out in the long way for certain situation, okay? Okay, and then because you have the long defense, okay? So if enemy attack on this side will go to help to defend it. If on the middle, so it kind of, you can imagine that's the one of the strategy, Sun Tzu is teaching.
Nice. Yeah. So you kind of have a plan for how your soldiers are going to react no matter where the enemy attacks.
Yes, that's right. That's one of them. And you say, is that really work or not work? I don't know, but I know the Mongolian Genghis Khan come to China.
We'll have to, right.
They just run through. So
we would need like a couple 100,000 people to run that experiment now. Cool. Maybe we can just these last couple of chapters we can
we only have
go through. Two chapters left.
Yeah. So chapter 12, that's interesting. And then again, that's more on what do you want to understand, then how can you use. I'm not saying you should set fire,
This one's all about attacking by fire.
Yeah, so, talking about fire, right? And they did the 5 different, right? Burn the soldier, okay, burn the storage, burn the equipment, burn the magazines, arsenals, burn the passage. So, and then 5 possible developer of fire. You burn the fire from inside, burn the fire without moving your military, burn the fire, blah, 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 blah. So basically talk about all the fire used.
Well, and this is kind of the first 4 or 5 at least are all about kind of like disabling your enemy. So, if you're burning their food or you're burning their equipment, you're putting them at a serious disadvantage. So this is, again, kind of going on that, like thinking strategically, looking for the advantage. And, different military commanders have done this at different times. I think there's a famous battle, I can't remember, with Julius Caesar against the Gauls, where he like famously like surrounded their entire village with his army. So they, he was cutting off their food supply. So he basically eventually got them to surrender from doing that.
So yeah, so this one talk about fire. Is anything you think important here you want to talk about?
I'd like to do a little bit in chapter 13.
Okay, before move to
Yeah.
third.
Okay.
Yeah. I think this one is a good.
Oh, there's one line.
Yeah.
In my translation at the end, it's quote, if it is to your advantage to make a forward move, make a forward move. If not, stay where you are. Because that kind of brought home again, unless you see a reason to do something, you should not do it. You should conserve your energy. So again, this is like everything should have a reason. You shouldn't just
Yeah. But here, okay, so I'd like to mention here is like, I just like use this one as an example, like when we read, especially Chinese ancient texts and probably any text, right? We should not just grab one sentence.
Okay. Yeah.
So here say, okay, yeah, Chinese ancient wisdom, ancient sage tell us, okay, burn the people, burn from outside. So,
right.
And this one even not advice to the prince. You cannot imagine, right? Our chief advisor tell the prince or President Biden, okay, we should set fire in these 5 different ways. That's
sure. Well, is there maybe a broader context to understand the line that I just read? I didn't mean to oversimplify it. Does that make sense? What for the line that I just read? Were you suggesting there's maybe a broader context to understand that line?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's the way I read it. Because this one is very specific to the commander in the field.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't extend it to the. Of course, you can say, "Oh, that tells we have to be prepared. We should do something." But just stay with the text. I don't see the message he want to tell. He just want to very specific.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
If you read a little bit side topic, if you read the Moism, okay, that's another Chinese philosophy, you'll find out it's very interesting. He talk about the universal love, okay, unbiased love. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's a lot of friends talk about love, but all of a sudden you will see he talk about very detailed how to build the wall, 4 feet wide, 10 feet, very detailed. Okay, the situation is this. He is not just a philosopher. He is doing something. So he talk about love and also teach you how to defend your country. Okay.
Yeah.
So he is not like today's people will say, oh, this one belong to philosophy, this one belong to engineering. Right? So they all mixed together. Same situation like this. So some place they are talking about very high level. Here you talk about how to set the fire.
Okay. Gotcha. So gotcha. So we shouldn't draw like big philosophical.
I just don't see here has any philosophical lesson.
Okay.
Of course, you can say I see my mom cook, then I learn philosophy from the way she cook. That's fine, but she just cook. Okay.
Right. Cool.
So
we want to do chapter 13.
Yeah, that's the spy. Yeah. So in my again, it's he talk about very important about the spy. Okay, let's back to my own interpretation. Is this text represent the change of culture? Okay, from the gentleman's war, okay, to the life and the death fighting. Okay,
yeah,
no more. It's not talking about follow certain common rule. Okay. So that's why they put the last chapter as spy. Probably that become a new concept, right? Setting fire using spy, that become a new concept. during that time.
Definitely. And I, naively only thought there was like maybe one, maybe two types of spies. So I thought it was cool kind of learning about these. Can we maybe go through these 5 different types of spies?
So you want you to read your five kind of spy?
So we had the local spy.
That
So
means local people, right?
So what is I did not quite understand the local spy. What is that?
Okay, let's
that
just say if I'm going to go to, let's pick Mexico, okay?
Yeah.
So I will recruit the local Mexican as a spy, right?
Okay. So you're kind of using, maybe in the military context, you would use civilians that are around the enemy
local, they familiar everything. They know
okay.
the food, blah blah blah, and it's easy. You can just provide the good food, good stuff, iPhone,
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. So you're getting some like intel from the locals.
Yeah.
Then the inward spy.
That means you just have to bribe. I think it means bribe the government official, okay?
To give you information.
Information, right?
Okay, yeah.
That's the inward, right? They are military, okay, people, okay, the government official, and we know how to do it, right?
Right.
You can use a woman, okay. Many ways you can do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. I think sex is probably one of the easiest way to get.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There's probably been a lot of
You don't have you don't need
a lot of information passed in the bedroom.
Yeah,
a lot of valuable information. Yeah.
You don't need Sun Tzu to tell you.
Yeah, sure.
Every
Right.
country, everybody knows how to.
Right. People let all of their secrets spill. After a good ramp in the sack. And then we have double agent. So this is the converted spy. So I understood this is like if you were to capture your enemy's spies and maybe, I don't know, torture them or bribe them.
Yeah.
Just bribe them. Okay. To get information from them. So if they're spying on you, you capture their spies. And then is that what the double agent?
They have the real example. Well, I should not say real. There's a famous novel called The Romans of Three Kingdoms. Okay. They wrote it in the 15th century.
Okay.
So a lot of the author, that's a novel, but based on the historical account. So we don't know if it's true or not true. They talk about three kingdoms. That at that time, China has three kingdoms. They are fighting. So there's a lot of strategy being used here. So one example for this is, let's say A and B. Okay, I'm in B. Or let's say Zach and Jason. Okay, you send a spy, come here, right? And being caught. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just start to punish him, tie him up, so I'm going to kill you. Tomorrow, I'm going to sacrifice you for blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And then at night, I just invite my friends, say, yeah, I got a great spy, So start to drink, right? And drink, I got drunk, right? And then I start to talk about some military secret. Then I fall asleep. And I just intentionally let my captive escape. So he went back to your country and told you, okay, I find it. Jason said this, but which is wrong information.
Okay. So you're intentionally giving their spies wrong information.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's the way it goes. Okay. So that's I think that's the one he is talking about.
Interesting. Okay, so it's kind of similar to the doomed spy, but it's the opposite of the doomed spy. It's where you're giving their spies wrong information, whereas the doomed spy, you're giving your own spy wrong information.
Same thing, yeah. And in the Romans of Three Kingdoms also have the same situation. Like, for example, we are in the same country, right? Okay, so you agree you want to be the spy, okay, for me. So you will go to, let's say, Mexico, okay, to send the wrong information, okay. But I want to make sure they believe you, right? So just find a case, you do something wrong, I just punish you, beat you up, and straight I'm going to kill you and also kill your whole family and put them in jail. And at night you just escape, right? And they have a spy here. Okay. So they know I punish you severely, and I'm going to kill you and also your family. So you escape. So they have no reason to suspect you as a spy. So you start to spread the wrong information to them. Okay. So
gotcha.
So you need to have a lot of sacrifice.
Wow.
So there's a lot of things. I don't know if historical correct or not, but basically that's kept in the book. Okay, so-called.
It's interesting. I mean, I think me and maybe most people just think when we think of spies, we think of like James Bond, just like the traditional. This is a person who's undercover, maybe pretending to be somebody they're not, who's getting information. But this gets into like all kinds of different levels of.
Yeah. So this strategy that builds to the end, we can kind of just sum up, everything there. So this one is the Sun Tzu's Art of Military, right? When you read this one, I think the name of Art of War is kind of romanticized, right? It's not really art, but in Chinese name, it's not art. Okay, Chinese name calls it the method of military method.
Okay. Military method. Okay. Yeah, I guess that name doesn't sell as many books at Barnes and Noble or something. But it's maybe more accurate. Okay.
Yeah. Try to sell the book better. So that's why I do this one. And a lot of things has been summarized as so-called 36 stratagems. Okay. So that's also become a common saying in Chinese daily conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily tied to military, but basically it's all related. Okay. So later on, also have a novel called The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Okay. This novel is described the story about the 200, the second century. Okay. A common era. Okay. During that time, China has been break up into 3 different kingdoms, and they are fighting each other.
Okay.
So, 500 years later, at this time, people wrote the book or novel based on the historical account, and that book catch a lot of story of this kind of setting fire, using spy, military formation, all this one. So everything is backward. If you read that the novel, okay, understand the 36 stratagem, okay, then read the Sun Tzu, then you know how does everything come in. Okay.
Interesting.
Together. So if you want to know all the detail how to use it, okay, the Romance of Three Kingdoms, okay, is the best way to do it, because you do it, you know exactly what Sun Tzu is talking about, because it's a big book, 120 chapter, just like War and the Peace, huge book. Okay,
and you can see these different tactics kind of playing out in the narrative.
How they use it, just like the story I told you. Punish the people, send over, catch the people, spit the wrong information, how to set the fire, and how to use enemy's resources. For example, you don't have enough arrow, so you just to fake and then steal, let them shoot you, and you collect a lot. So there's many story on that. So that's the way you can say the practice book. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a manual. Okay. For this book. So
that's cool. I mean, as I was reading this, I was thinking of a lot of different, books I've read, or like novels and different movies where you see, somebody in the movie like using one of these tactics or a similar tactic. So that was cool. Maybe cool. So since we got through it, just to maybe wrap up.
I'd like to bring the I think it's the very last sentence.
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay. So very last paragraph. Let me see what's the very last one. The very last one is talking about. Oh, not very last. they talk about the spy are the most important element. The mobility of the army depends on the spy.
Mm.
The last sentence of the second last paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay, so he talked about how important a spy. He said spy are the most important element. Okay, the mobility, your military mobility is totally depends on the spy. Okay, so let us see how.
Because the spy is going to inform you where you should move.
Inform you or misinform your military enemy.
Mm.
So, and the very last sentence, I believe your translation probably confuse you, right? If you read the very.
Yeah, I have spies are a most important element in war. Because of them largely depends an army's ability to move.
Yes, that's the last message. And he used an example. Okay, I should not go detail, but basically talk about the ancient example. Okay, ancient, even they are very ancient. They even have something more ancient than Sun Tzu. They use his historical account to explain okay, how important of spy. So the whole message you will see from the very high principle military philosophy to the very end, the very detail. Then with the most important thing is the spy.
Gotcha. It's cool. I'm actually reading Machiavelli's The Art of War right now.
Reading his Art of War. It's a dialogue, right?
It's a dialogue. It kind of writes it as like a Socratic dialogue, but it's interesting because it's formatted kind of the opposite, where Machiavelli starts with like very specific strategy and where to put soldiers in battle and all of these things, and then at the end he kind of talks about like the high level general principles and philosophy to follow. So it's kind of like the inverse of this book.
That's a typical situation, right? In Western, you talk about your first name, then talk about your family name, right? And the Asian, you talk about your family name, then talk about your.
That's an interesting observation. Yeah.
Same as address, you will say 2255 Franklin Street, okay, right? And the state, the city, the state, right? Then USA, right? And so in Asia, you will do it the opposite way. You talk about a New York City, a New York State, New York City, 54th Street, 224, number 224. Second floor. Okay.
So the West moves from micro to macro. Maybe the East moves from macro to micro.
Because the Western are more individualism. So you think about yourself first, then you go up, right? And the Asian or called Eastern are more collective. So you think about the big picture, then you going down. So that also affects the way I read.
Yeah.
Okay? Because you will be hard for me to read Machiavelli's Art of War, because it will become like I need to know the big picture, okay, before I read the detail. So okay, so I'm not sure. That's the way I explain to people. I kind of think about, am I doing the right thing? Because that's the way I'm thinking. You may not think this way. You probably want to know.
No, I think I probably think the opposite, because I grew up and you read like a personal essay or something like that written in America. Most of them are a person telling their like individual story or their experience, and then the last couple paragraphs they're saying like the macro big, this is how it applies to everybody, this is how it applies to this and that. So I think I'm much more kind of conditioned to think along those lines.
Yeah, so like this Sun Tzu, right? If they reverse the order,
this is the opposite. Yeah.
Help you.
No, it's
understand. If you just read the chapter 13 and eventually you read the chapter 1, right?
Well, it gives it also kind of, if you're reading this as a general and you're reading it in this order, by the time you get to the specifics, you know exactly why you're doing that, because you've already gotten the kind of macro general principles behind it. So that makes more sense to me. Whereas if, you're a general reading Machiavelli, you might be like, yeah, I don't know about this, and that. You know, these specifics seem a little weird, and it wouldn't be till the end where you're actually like, oh, this is why he decided to line up the men in this formation.
Yeah, so I actually there's no which way is right or wrong, but I'm sure if you change the order, right, you probably will get a totally different lesson from this book. That's put this way.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, so but at least the book, at least in the I don't know what the original thing who make this order. I have no idea, but basically at least if you talk about this book, basically it's ordered in this way, and then. I read it as from the high level to low level, from big picture to small picture. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's a good book.
I'm glad I read it with you, and we were able to do this too, because you put a lot of emphasis on the order and which chapter and who it's being addressed to. Whereas I think, again, it's probably my own like Western bias. One of the things I tend to do when I read is to kind of look for these themes and then say like, oh, this thing he was talking about in chapter 1 also relates to what he's talking about in chapter 11. And oh, this theme, but that might be, at least for this text, maybe not the best way to approach it.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. It's not a good way to approach it, but your way can probably work for if you read in the Tao Te Ching, okay, the Tao is a text, or reading the Confucius Analects, right? Because the order is, at least in my point of view, not that important. So you can read this one, talk about how to treat your parent, and it's referred to another one, right? When your parents die, what you have to do, okay, and that's referred to another one about the treat your kids just like you blah blah blah. It's all related, right? So you can jump around, but this one, I think, who is the audience is very important. So.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, this was great. I'm glad we got to spend the proper time going through it. After we did our meetup, we both kind of felt like we scratched the surface, but there was a little bit, there's some stuff that we could get to.
It should do it in 2 sections.
Yeah.
And you are right. At the beginning, you probably kind of think about doing 2 sections, right? I think. Yeah, probably should do it but again, I think this one makes sense because it's kind of like you read the book, right? From the first word to the last word, then I finish. So it gives you a different kind of feeling, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And most of the book you cannot do that because it's too long. And this one
is right. You can read it in an afternoon.
Yeah, you can read it, and then it's not too long, and it's orderly. You put its order has purpose. So so if you read from the beginning to the end in one shot, I think that's a good experience.
Cool. Well, Jason, thanks so much for doing this and putting the time in.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's great. I always feel like explain this ancient Chinese or old Chinese thinking to Western, okay, and actually I don't know how much you learn, you benefit. By this, I think I always feel like I benefit a lot.
Okay? Yeah, no, I definitely did.
I reorganize in a different way, okay, because when you grow up in this culture, a lot of things you just like this, you don't question, okay. But when you have to explain other way, you start to question why you think about this way. So I think to me, bring me to a different way of understanding what I thought I understand before. So
great. Well, I'm glad you got some value out of going through it and explaining it, and I definitely got a lot out of it as well.
At least I think both of us very enjoy talking about it.
Yeah, right. Cool, man. Well, yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that would be good. There's plenty of stuff in there. Yeah. Yeah, right. So I'll probably cut it down a little bit, but I'll try to keep the integrity of it as much. And I think there's plenty of great stuff in there.
Yeah, I think we don't waste time, I think.
Yeah.
Most are very.
Yeah, we
Yes.
I think we hit on everything, and
We hit on everything, and then we don't hanging around on something not important.
yeah,
Except the last 2 minutes we talk about chat. So
yeah, exactly. Well, cool, man. Well, yeah, I'll edit it sometime this week, and I can send you um a early thing if you want.
okay, send to me. So where you want you're not
Yeah.
putting YouTube, right? You're not putting.
So I'm probably not doing YouTube just because since I'm gonna edit the audio, like you know what I mean, it would probably mess up if I did it in video format.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I can send you like a quick time video or something.
Yeah, can you send me the
Yeah.
you have the recording. I can download from yours. Then let me see.
Yeah, I can send you both too. I mean, I can send you the full thing, and then I can send you kind of the edited one I do. I'm gonna try to do it about an hour and a half if I can.
Okay. Yeah.
So I might have to cut out some stuff, but I'm gonna try to, do my best. I've been getting better at kind of paring them down.
That's good. I'm not good in editing. So if you send me the just send me the link for the what's it the Zoom download.
Yeah.
Okay, then I will deal with that. So
just you want me to just send you the edit, or you want me to send you the full one just to listen? I don't know. I'm not expecting you to edit. I just mean if you wanted to listen to the whole
I just
one.
want to take a review on that. See, that's it.
Sure.
Then actually it doesn't matter. Actually, whatever you do, I'm fine.
Okay. Well, I'll send you both just so if you
whatever you think you want send to me, and you send to me, and then that's it. And if I think I need something, I ask you, and then that's it. So
okay, sounds good.
I'm thinking in the head, I probably don't have time to.
Right.
No, the end of the year, I'm pretty busy, so
I hear you. Well, I really appreciate you you making the time to do this again.
Yeah,
yeah,
I enjoy it. Yeah, then hope we can do something else, together, next.
Absolutely.
Some subject, I'm familiar, so. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, good luck with your move and everything, and yeah, best wishes to your father as well.
Yeah, that I'm going to. Yeah, I haven't go to Taiwan for 2 years, I think. Yeah, before I go to Taiwan, I go 2-3 times a year.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's some friend, some business over there, but I've been locked out before.
Yeah. Right. Cool. All right. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Great. Yeah, and you say you got new job, right?
Yeah, I'm working Barnes and Noble.